I'm Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud. This is Commotion. Today on the podcast, a reunion I never thought would happen.
Maybe I don't really want to know how you got and grows, 'cause I just want to fly.
Oasis is getting back together. That is a real thing that is happening. Liam and Noel Gallagher just announced that they'll be back on stage together again. This is something that people believed would just never happen again because of what we knew about how much these brothers hated each other. But here we are. Alex Spears is here. Maura Johnston is here. Rich Pelley is here. Folks, welcome to the Hell Freezes Over edition of Commotion. Welcome to the show, everybody. How's it going?
Hey,
thanks for having us.
Great, thanks.
I'm excited to get into this. I can't believe that it's actually happening. Rich, I'm going to start with you because this announcement has been teased for a few days now. Today, you get this joint statement from the brothers. It's in truly Gallagher brother fashion. It is incredibly dramatic. The guns have fallen silent. The stars have aligned. The great wait is over. Come see, it will not be televised. That's the statement that they release. Rich, what's happening there?
So that's their words, not your words. I know how excited you are.
Yes.
We have heard today in the UK and around the world that Oasis are reforming, and we know they're doing 14 dates next July and August.
Yes.
So they're going to do dates in Wales, Scotland, Manchester, London, and Dublin, and then that's all we know.
Yeah.
So we don't know who's in the band. That's the big question.
Yeah.
And we don't know anything else apart from the dates that have been announced.
Yet somehow that seems to be more than enough information for everybody to sort of just get into a tizzy. I think like reasonably so. This is an announcement that is like a long time in the making. Alex, we should say you are in an Oasis cover band, Park Life, and my friend Lauren went to see you guys your gig last week, and she had a great time. You were deeply in the Oasis fan universe. How badly did fans want Liam and Noel to get back together?
So I think there's a combination of two things. First, there was a segment of the fan base that was just resigned to it never happening. I would count myself among those. I've been people have been messaging me today saying, like, you said it was never going to happen, and I'm kind of having to eat my hat a little bit. But
yeah,
the way people have been looking at it, at least in a significant chunk of the fan base, is they're almost like hypochondriacs. So I'm a hypochondriac with my healthcare.
Yeah.
I have a little, pain in my knee. I think I'm dying.
Yeah.
Noel says something slightly not totally cruel about Liam in an interview, and there's this, and people go off. It's nuts. And there's this one Facebook group in particular called the Parka Monkeys, where it does feel like every couple of weeks there's some new craze where people are fully convinced it's going to happen and just feeding into the echo chamber.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's surreal. It truly is surreal because it's legit this time.
Look, Alex, people think like Swifties are crazy. I'm like, no, I think the people who were talking about an Oasis reunion for years are way crazier, personally, because.
Well, and to that point,
yeah,
if I may,
you may.
I think now the original speculation.
Oh, I'm having a bit of trouble hearing you there, Alex.
10 shows at Wembley. They've only announced.
I'm having
apologies. How's that?
Okay,
that?
That's a little bit better. I can hear you a little bit better now. So you're saying that the original speculation that they're doing some shows at Wembley.
Yes. The original speculation was 10 shows at Wembley.
Yeah.
And while they've only announced they've announced a smaller number than that, but I think that remains to be seen. If it sells out, they could do 10. And my take, honestly, is that Taylor Swift holding the record for sold out shows at Wembley is exactly what motivated Noel Gallagher to get off the couch and do this, because he couldn't stand the fact that someone other than his band was holding that record when it would be just the easiest thing in the world for him to do it.
What's amazing about this is that, like, for people who don't have a relationship with Oasis or with the Gallagher brothers, you'd go, no artist could possibly be that petty. But hearing that about Liam, I go, like, yeah, absolutely. I could 100% believe that he would be that kind of petty sort of figure. Maura, I want to get back to you in just a moment. But Rich, maybe I want to look at, for a moment, get a sense of Oasis' very particular place in culture. Let's play some song. I mean, this is a band that like belongs to people in a way very few bands belong to people. That's one of the last shows they ever played. You get the sense that the audience is just there, ready to do anything for them. How massive were Oasis at their peak, would you say, Rich?
They were massive. They appealed to everybody. That's the whole thing. The big stats is when they played Nebworth in 1996, which is a big open outdoor venue that they historically use for gigs, and 5% of the population applied for tickets. So
Wow.
I think it was 125,000 people a day, so a quarter of a million over 2 days, but 5%, which is 10 times more than tickets that were sold.
Yeah.
So that, if we go back to what Alex said about Wembley, and if you look at the schedule, they're doing 2 a week at the moment, and then having a week off and doing 2 more in Wembley. They're going to open up those dates. They're going to beat Taylor Swift. They're going to beat their own record.
Yeah.
But they were huge. And I think one of the reasons they reformed is that Noel Gallagher has always said he didn't want to tarnish the relationship with Oasis. So people who knew them the first time, why do we go and see a couple of middle-aged men doing not quite as good job as before? But Oasis have transcended the generations, and Generation Z are now massively into Oasis, as much as Generation X were when they came out. So I think Noel has said how surprised he is at how many kids are singing Oasis songs back to him when he plays solo gigs. So giving the kids the chance to see them is brilliant for them, but it's going to make it more difficult for us trying to get tickets, because now the whole world wants to see them. It doesn't matter whether it's your nephew or your dad. Everybody's got to see Oasis.
You know what? I actually want to return to the contemporary use of Oasis, sort of the contemporary sort of space that Oasis occupies in just a moment. But maybe more, you can root us a little bit more in the way that Oasis broke through, because they broke through in North America in ways that most British bands just don't. How do you explain their enormous appeal, Maura?
I think it speaks to what Rich was talking about just how they were so massive. I mean, obviously there was the whole Britpop boom, right? I'm sorry if that word about the and
you got to say a trigger warning before you say Britpop.
I know. Yeah. But like you had bands like Pulp and Suede, which were sort of my favorites, but Oasis, like, they had that kind of like brawniness and mass appeal that American rock fans want. There's a certain type of swaggering masculinity that I think Oasis had and has, and that really appealed to American listeners, not just like the people who listen to alt rock radio, but like the people who tuned into classic rock radio. And I think you can also point to the fact that, like, around the time that What's the Story, Morning Glory came out, that was also around the time that the Beatles were sort of back in the conversation, because they put out that song Free as a Bird, which was sort of reconstituted from old tapes a couple of months after What's the Story, Morning Glory came out.
The idea of Oasis being sort of having contemporary appeal is something that I want to talk about a little bit, because Alex, as far as I can tell, you're not a middle-aged man, and you play in an Oasis cover band. I don't think we can have this conversation without hearing from Matty Healy of the 1975. He was on Q not that long ago, and he said this to Tom Power.
What are Oasis doing? Can you imagine being in, potentially, right now, still the coolest band in the world, and not doing it because you're in a mard with your brother? Stop marding. They're like men of the people, and they're sat around in like Little Venice and Highgate, like crying over an argument with their brother. Grow up. Headline Glastonbury.
Have a good time.
Have a good time.
Yeah.
Have a laugh.
Grow up, headline Glastonbury might be my favorite admonishment that anyone's given a rock star, Alex. But also the idea that like Oasis right now could be the coolest rock band in the world. That's a significant statement. What do you make of what Maddie's saying there? The idea that they're still this band that has this mass cool appeal.
Well,
I think the biggest thing that he's getting at is the frustration that fans feel, where like they are seen as an incredibly cool band right now. Like they are seen as having a certain quality that's, you know, you can describe it as swagger, bravado, but it is indescribable in a lot of ways. They are seen as having this quality that contemporary rock bands just don't, and they are seen as having this size and scale that contemporary rock bands just don't. I mean, if we're looking to bands like, you know, the Arctic Monkeys, Fontaines DC, these are incredible groups putting out really, really great music, but there's something missing there. So the idea that these two dudes are there, like they're not dead, they're still there. They're still, you know, on this mortal plane, physically capable of doing the thing, and they're not doing the thing is infuriating, and it's been infuriating. So, like, Maddie perfectly captured the just deep frustration that I think fans, and particularly fans of my generation who never got to see them in the first place, feel.
Well,
I think also,
go ahead, Rich.
had Noel and Liam not fallen out, and had they been matey, and had, you know, Liam sometimes turn up on Noel gigs and sing a few songs, and Noel turn up at a Liam gig and play a bit of guitar, no one would have wanted them to get back together. I think it's very clever because they've kept each other in the papers, and
They've kept the feud, you mean, in the
15 years. The feud has, and had it not happened, no one would have wanted this.
Rich, do you want to get into that a little bit? Because like, there's something about the relationship, the explosive tension between these two brothers, at least publicly, that we've seen, that has kind of formed how we think about this band. The relationship between the two of them, in many ways, is the band. What do you make of the way that relationship worked its way into the music, Rich?
Well, there's the famous Wibbling Rivalry, which was a 7-inch single of them just arguing. They got into the charts in the UK.
Yeah, someone released a recording of the two of them arguing, and it sold so well that it got into the charts in the UK. That's how well that recording did. Yeah. Yeah,
but also they're brothers, and if you've got a brother, you're going to fight with them in a way that you don't fight with a partner or a friend, because you've always got that unconditional love between you. And Noel and Liam, for the last 15 years, have often said on record they love each other, even amongst all the bickering. So I think they've been friends the whole time, and the whole thing has just been a PR stunt to keep them in the press.
This is the longest running PR stunt of our life, if that is the case.
Yeah.
A 15-year PR stunt is quite an aggressively long PR stunt. Quite a commitment, I would say.
It's worked.
Yeah, you're right.
It worked. Yeah.
That's true. That is true. We are here talking about it. Maura, I want to say there's actually something kind of endearing about the consistency of this bickering between the two of them. Like, sometimes they just take these completely random shots at each other. I want you to listen to this. A journalist tried to talk to Noel about Twitter. Have a listen to this.
Well, you know, our president is on Twitter quite
and so is my brother. And quite literally, I put the pair of them in a driverless car each, so we ran into each other.
Maura, that's unbelievable. The question was not at all about his brother, but Noel's like, I can't possibly resist this. How did the feud play into their mythology, you think?
I mean, I think it helped, keep them at the forefront of discussion while, like Rich said, they were holding off from playing and really waiting for that moment for the iron to strike. I do think that they definitely are in line with a lot of the sort of great combustible duos of rock. You have Lennon McCartney, Plant and Page, Mick and Keith, and I have to represent Boston by shouting out the Toxic Twins, Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. And I feel like those sorts of relationships are, the rock equivalent of Bennifer or something, where everyone's like, are they going to get back together? What's going to happen? It very much plays into that kind of gossipy impulse. Sure. But at the same time, it also makes people realize that, what they really want is for these people to kind of reconcile and get back together.
Alex,
can I ask, Maura? Sorry, I'm curious. Do you I'm always fascinated by with bands of this genre where you look at Oasis who made it in the States, but a group like the Stone Roses or the Happy Mondays of a similar sort of scene, if you will, didn't. How much of their success in the States was due to that sort of that combustible quality?
That's a good question. I mean, I really think it's more about the sound, just because I feel like, British acts have traditionally had a tough time, with obvious giant exceptions,
Yeah.
getting into the American realm, just because they're not as brawny. I mean, even the song like Wonderwall has like a kind of like hugeness about it
Yeah.
that I think even with, I think a lot of these songs are anthems, but there's definitely an idea in American rock where, you know, even with the kind of hangover that people had from like hair metal in the late 80s, Nirvana and bands and Pearl Jam were still like big swaggery rock bands,
Mm-hmm.
and acts that were less, maybe a little more subtle, didn't break through in the same way.
So if folks
Maura, you mentioned Bennifer there.
I did.
Are they going to get back together? Which is very true, but with Bennifer, they're trying to get married and live their whole life together. With Noel and Liam, all they've got to do is commit to standing on stage with each other.
That's true.
For 2 hours.
That's a very good point.
And frankly, that sounds harder. That sounds way harder for those two.
2 hours could be a year.
I mean, I generally wonder how much of the sales for this tour are going to be the intrigue of watching these two people who are kind of like repellent magnets, or have been like repellent magnets in the past 15 years or so, standing next to each other again, and what that will be like. I mean, they said that this will not be televised, which is, I feel like, a dig at all these sort of like tour videos that we've seen coming out in the last little while. But also, like, I'm desperate for someone to televise this, because I don't think I'm going to be able to go to this thing, but I desperately want to see it. I should say,
I want to see tambourines chucked at head. My experience will not be complete without that.
This is the appeal. Let me just pause here and remind people we are talking about. My name is Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud, and this is Commotion. Look, we're talking about Oasis getting back together. They have a 14-date tour of the UK and Ireland next year. We might get more. Alex Spears is here. He plays drums in an Oasis cover band. Culture critics Rich Pelley and Maura Johnston are here. Okay, all of you got to listen to this clip. It's Liam backstage at one of his concerts recently, and he's complaining about having to make his own tea.
No one buys records these days. In the 90s, I had about 4 people doing it. Little geezer doing a kettle, and some other little idiot doing that. Now you got to do it yourself these days. You know what I mean? Because these not smart asses download tunes for niche, and they wonder why there's no real rock and roll stars around. Because this is the shit you got us doing.
Liam Gallagher is very upset about having to make his own tea. Maura, part of what he's talking about there is the idea that there are no rock stars anymore. Oasis could be an exception to that. This is a cultural moment that doesn't really have a lot of use for rock stars. Oasis are an obvious kind of challenge to this. Do you think them reuniting fills a void in any way?
Yes. I mean, one thing, though, you have to remember about Oasis is that they came up in a very different media environment. And I think that the sort of decline of the rock star isn't as much about streaming as it is about this diffusion of the media environment. Particularly, with rock. I mean, rock is not the number one genre. Like, it's not the dominant musical idiom of youth culture anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You have hip hop, you have dance music, you have a lot of other things encroaching on it and sometimes overtaking it. And I think also with rock in particular, you had kind of a peculiar thing happen, and particularly started in the early 2000s and definitely has progressed since, in as much as you had this kind of like bifurcation of artists that were getting played on radio a lot, which were like uncool genres like nu metal and post-grunge, and also artists that had legacies like Oasis, like the Foo Fighters. And then you kind of had the critical acclaim artists like Strokes, Franz Ferdinand, who had more of a subtle, almost like a lot of the appeal of a lot of other Britpop acts. And I think that is also a thing. But I mean, hey, Spin Magazine just announced that they were coming back into print, so maybe maybe this is like some perfect timing where the rock star will be back on the rise.
Oasis is back. Spin Magazine is back. Who knows where this is going to take us? Rich, I got to ask you, obviously a part of the motivation for this is money. I think we have to consider the idea that, like, yes, there are many other good reasons to get back together. Yes, they also have a lot of money, but it's gonna help to have a little bit more. We are in an environment where you, right before we started rolling, you kind of took a little shot at me for being like for liking one of the later Oasis records because the first two sort of stand so much bigger than the rest of their discography. Can you imagine them making a new album? Can you imagine them making like another Standing on the Shoulders of Giants? I want to hear another Roll It Over. What about you?
Well, I mean, how confident are you they're going to play any songs whatsoever off your favourite Oasis album, Standing on the Shoulder of Giants?
I'm not.
You're going to be the only person who goes to see Oasis reform and walks away disappointed.
If they don't play Go Let It Out, I think I'll be a little bit mad. But can you imagine that? Can you imagine them making a new record?
I can. I have read today that they've committed. They've said they're categorically not going to do that.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is weird because you think they might do. But if you look at, say, the Stone Roses who reformed, they managed a couple of singles everyone has forgotten about. Yeah. And whatever Oasis do, really, their first album was the best, the second album was the second best, the third album was the third best, and the fourth album was the fourth best. Argue if you like about that order, but the last album wasn't the best album. Yeah. So whatever they do, I don't think would live up to the legacy of the early albums that everybody loves. So whether they do, because on the other hand, some of Noel Gallagher's solo material is the best stuff he's ever written.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So he's got it in him. So who knows?
I don't think fans care. I actually don't think that, like, I really don't, like, people want to see them live. They want, like, see, and this is another point that Matty Healy made in his interview, which is that, there's not a single person at a Noel solo show or a Liam solo show who wouldn't rather be at an Oasis show because they have what the other lacks in a really perfect puzzle piece kind of a way. And I think people just want to see that. Like, I've not seen anything to indicate that fans are thirsting for new music. They've got the music. They're happy with the music. They've, like, the first three records plus the master plan plus, in my case, in your case, Elamin, Standing on the Shoulders of Giants. That's enough. That's all we need. So I don't see any need for it.
Actually, I feel like I need to defend my Oasis stays here and say my favorite album is actually Heathen Chemistry, which is not Standing on the Shoulders of Giants. I think Little by Little is a gigantic tune, and I feel like we don't talk about that song enough. But having said all this, sorry, go ahead, Rich.
So maybe they'll end up touring it album by album, and by the time you get to Heathen Chemistry, it'll just be you and them.
Alex, I'm going to give the last word to you on this because in your other life, you also play in this cover band. How are you thinking about trying to get some tickets to go see Oasis?
So I have, I think, much to my partner's sort of chagrin, I've said I'm willing to drop $1,000 on tickets alone. Yeah. I will fly out to the UK. I'm not taking chances that they're going to split up before making it to Toronto. I saw Rage Against the Machine 3 shows before they broke up and didn't make it over to Europe. I don't want the same thing to happen. I'm going, and I'm willing to drop a slightly shocking amount of dough to make it happen.
Alex, Maura and Rich and I are all pulling for you, pal. I really hope that this happens for you. We got to leave it there for all of you. Maura, Rich, Alex, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Of course. My pleasure. Thank you so much. Alex Spears works in public relations and plays drums in the Oasis cover band Parklife. They're playing September 6th in Toronto, by the way. A great alternative if you can't make it across the pond next year. Rich Pelley is a journalist with The Guardian in London, and Maura Johnston is a freelance music journalist based in Boston.